Okay, welcome back everyone to part 2 of our Motzei Shabbos Marathon, sponsored by Abi Spry and Michal Avram Chavin. And we thank you all very much for joining us, and remind you that this coming week, a special alteration of the Shir is Tuesday night. Shir is being broadcast from Chicago, so Shir will be at 8 o'clock Chicago time, which is 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So Shir will be at 9 p.m. on Tuesday. Wednesday, hopefully, God willing, I'll be back in time for the Daf and the Haggadah Shir, which will be on Wednesday. New Mishnah on the top of Lamed Chesam and Aleph. Hamafkid peiros eitzel chaveroi. Here, I deposit fruit by Marshall. So afilu hein avudin, even if they begin to deteriorate, they begin to rot, lo yiga behen, Marshall should not touch them. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, in order to save my fruit, moichron b'fnei bezdin, he should sell them in the presence of bezdin. We'll see, he can't buy them himself, but he should sell them in the presence of bezdin. This way my fruit won't disintegrate. It's like he's returning a lost article to the owner. Now the shaila is, why does the Tanakama hold that Marshall can't touch them? So right away the Gemara asks, my timer, what's the reason of the Tanakama that Marshall can't touch them? Says the Gemara, you know why? Because a person likes his own stuff. That's the way it is. If you make vegetables in your backyard, you enjoy that cucumber. You enjoy that. You taste this tomato. Whoa, what a tomato, right? Because it says the Gemara, my time. Adam writes a bekav shaloi. He wants his own product. Metisha kavim shel chavera, even from 9 times of somebody else's product. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says there's a different reason. Marshall doesn't know. He has my fruit in the house. He doesn't know what I did with that fruit. I know I have fruit by Marshall. I might have assigned it as truma for other stuff in my house. I know that it's by Marshall. It safely is ensconced by Marshall. I might have said it should be truma for some of my fruit, and then he can't sell it because truma is also to a non-kayin. And that's the interesting reason that Rav Nachman Yitzchak says. Rav Nachman Yitzchak HaMachayshinon Shema Osan HaMafkid. Maybe I, the depositor, made it truma and meiser al makom acher. Made it truma and meiser for something else. Meisvei. So the Gemara says, Hamafkid peiros eitzel chaveira. If I deposit fruit by Marshall, Arizelo Yigabehem, Marshall can't touch them. Now, since Marshall can't touch them, lefikach balabayis oisai truma meiser al makom acher. Therefore, since I know Marshall is not going to be able to use them, therefore I could say it should be truma because I know he's not going to use it. So Bishloimel Rav Kahana, it's good according to Rav Kahana that says an independent reason why Marshall can't sell it. He can't sell it because I prefer to have my own stuff. Bishloimel Rav Kahana, hainu diktani lefikach. El Rav Nachman Yitzchak, but according to Rav Nachman Yitzchak, it's the other way around. The reason why Marshall can't sell it is because I might have done that. Not that the reason that since he can't sell it, therefore I can use it. El Rav Nachman Yitzchak, my lefikach, you got it backwards. Says, well, no, you're right. Hachikamer. Hashta de Amar Rabbanan. Loy Nazrin. Now that the Rabbanan say that Marshall cannot sell it, the Chayshinon, because we're afraid that maybe I separated it as Truma and Meiser, therefore now I can separate it safely. Lefikach balabayis oisais on Truma Meiser al makom acher. Says the Gemara, the plot thickens. Amar Rabba Babachan Amar Rabbi Yochanan, machloikes b'chdei chisroinan. The only time Marshall can touch it is only if it's deteriorating at the normal rate of deterioration. Aval But if it's deteriorating more rapidly than usual, then everybody holds marshal could sell it. Then Divrei Hakol Moichron Bebezdin. So the Gemara says, Ad Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Vade Pliga. This is definitely not like Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, because if it deteriorates more rapidly, how could marshal sell it? Maybe I separated it as Trumas and Maisvis. So definitely this argues on Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Ad Rav Kahana Milei Mad Pligi. Does this argue on Rav Kahana, who says that the reason is because I want my own stuff? Says, well, no. Ki kamer Rav Kahana bichdei chesreina kamer. I only want it if it's deteriorating in the normal rate, but if it's deteriorating rapidly, I would want marshal to sell it. Says the Gemara, but it says that it says that I prefer my own one kav in contrast to 9 kavim. 9 kavim, that's a very, very, very big difference. That's surely more than Kedei Chesrein. That's surely more than a minuscule deterioration. Says, well, no, that's Guzma Balma. That's a mere exaggeration. Obviously, I'd rather have 9 tomatoes of somebody else's than one of my own tomatoes. So that's just an exaggeration. Meisvei. So now the Gemara asks, let's see what it says. Lefikach balabayis oisa isan truma meiser al mokamach. Therefore, since marshal cannot sell it, so I know it's safely ensconced in marshal's flower room, so I could say that it should be truma on my other crops. But why? Why don't I worry that maybe it'll deteriorate more rapidly? Maybe that will have deteriorated rapidly, and v'zavninu, marshal sold it, and then when I separated it as truma, it wasn't there anymore, and now I'm eating tevel. V'ka'achol tvalim. Says, I don't have to worry about that. Why? Because Yosim Ichdei Chisrainan lo yishchiach. If it's Yosim Ichdei Chisrainan, that I should worry that maybe it deteriorated rapidly, that's not likely. So I don't have to worry about it. Says the Gemara, but wait. If it happens, what do we say? Mazlinalu. Marshal could sell it. But how could Marshal sell it? Maybe I separated it as truma. And how could he sell it to Yisrael? It might be truma. It's an isamisa for Yisrael to eat truma. Says, you're right. When Marshal sells it, he only sells it to a kohen for the price of truma. Ki mazvina nami lekahanim b'dmei truma mazvina lo. Says the Gemara, then why does Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak say that? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says that marshal can't touch it and he can't sell it because maybe I separated it as truma, so he could sell it. Let him sell it to a kohen. Well, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak nami nizveninu lekahanim b'dmei truma. So here's the problem. It's a cute problem. The problem is that if we allow him to sell it, he might sell it, and then afterwards I might separate it. Now let's see it inside. Ba'apligi. The Rabbi Bar Bachana Savar, Yosem Ichdei Chisrainan, Leishchiach Midei. That for it to deteriorate rapidly is not shchiach. And v'chi mishtakach, he says that deterioration of Yosim Ichdei Chisrainan is not something that happens rapidly. Yosim Ichdei Chisrainan lo yishchiach midei. It's not a normal occurrence. V'chi mishtakach, and if it's going to happen, if it's going to chance that before it deteriorates rapidly, it's going to happen that the owner, will sell it, will separate it as truma before it deteriorates rapidly. Therefore, Marshall cannot hilka kiavalu yaisim mechdei chisrainan. Therefore, hilka kiavalu yaisim mechdei chisrainan. If when it finally gets to deteriorate more than it normally does, so I will have already separated it as truma and meiser, and therefore he could sell it to a kohen and not have a problem. Nizvininu lekahanim b'dmei truma. Therefore, Marshall could sell it to kahanim for the value of truma. However, Rav Nachman Yitzchak savar yesem mechdei chisrainan mishkach shchiach. Sometimes it could rapidly deteriorate. And if it does, let's say it got very hot or it was very humid or whatever it is, v'chi havalu, and if it happens, la'alterhu da'havalu, it would happen immediately. Then if we allow Marshall to sell it, there's a real worry that he's going to sell it, and then afterwards I'm going to separate truma from it, not knowing that it wasn't there anymore because Marshall sold it. If we're going to give Marshall the green light to sell it, he'll have sold it right away. And when I, relying that it was there in Marshall's house and separated as truma, lo yada dezavna, I won't know that he sold it, and then I'll be eating tevel, which is a terrible sin, because it really wasn't truma, because it wasn't there anymore, because Marshall sold it. Now, Meisvei, Hamafkid Peris Eitzel Chaveiroi. If I deposit fruit by Marshall, Vir Kivu, and it gets rotten, Yayin Vehechmitz, wine, and it becomes vinegar, Shemen Vehivish, oil, it becomes sour, Dvash Vehidvish, honey, and it becomes sour, Harizelo Yiga Behen. Marshall can't touch them. Divrei Meir. The Chacham says, Oisil Lahem Takana, he makes a salvation, Omoichron Bebestin. And remember we said, he could sell it, but he can't sell it to himself. He sells it to others, we don't want, he wants to be above suspicion. If there's a charity collector, he doesn't have any poor people to give it to. He could change the money into big coins, but but he can't do it for himself. Gabay tamchui, if it's the one who gives out the food dish, if there's no food to give it, he sells it to others. But ketani mias, it says peiris v'kivu, fruit that became rotten. He can't touch them. Rameir says he can't touch them. My love, afilu yesim mechdei chisrainan. Is it talking about even if it deteriorated rapidly? Loi b'chdei chisrainan. It meant it deteriorated at a normal rate. Ay v'yayin v'hichmet shemen v'hidvish dvash v'hidvish. It says wine that became vinegar, oil that became sour, honey that became sour. That's complete spoilage. That's the yesem mechdei chisrainan ninu. So the Gemara says that's different because it already spoiled. So why sell it? Shani hani came into come. Once it stops, it stops. It became vinegar. That's it. Why should you sell it? Says the Gemara. But I don't understand. The Chacham say you should do a takana. What's the takana? Says the Gemara. Shemen v'hivish, dvash v'hidvish, oil that becomes sour, honey that becomes sour. What do you mean? What do you mean that the Chacham say you sell it? L'may chazul. What's it fit for? So the Gemara says shemen chazul legaldoi. Oil is fit for people that work with leather. Dvash l'katisha, and the honey is good to put on bed sores. The katisha de gamle, on sores of the camels. So the chachamim oiselem takana u'moichrim bebezdin. So the question is, what's the takana? As we said, kevin to come. It is what it is. It's not going to deteriorate anymore. What's the takana? My takan ta'avidlu. Ravashi l'kankanim. It's a takana for the barrels, because leaving it sour in the barrels ruined the barrels. So, we only bother Marshall to sell it if it's a big loss. To sell the whole thing, to go through the whole thing for the barrels, which is a small loss, it's not chashish. Now, Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, wow, it's an hour and 3 minutes. An hour and 3 minutes of nitzchias. An hour and 3 minutes of nitzchias. I think about this often. Over the years, I've had many people who've come to my shiurim, who came from my shiurim for years and years and years, every night, and are now in the Olam Emes. And I think about the fact that they're reaping the rewards of those thousands of hours of learning. It's a good thing to think that, and every hour that we put in, we're getting so much reward.
Each word is a mitzvah.
Each word is a mitzvah. That is correct. Now, Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, while the Tanakama said that Marshall can't touch the fruit, Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer Yimkerein bebezdin, that Marshall should sell them in bezdin. He's restoring the loss that my fruit are deteriorating. The law is like Reb Shimon Gamliel. Rav says in the name of Rav Nachman that the halacha is like the Chacham. Now the question is, why does Reb Yochanan have to say that the halacha is like Reb Shimon Gamliel? He already made a sweeping Shas statement. Rabbi Yochanan said, any time that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is mentioned in the Mishnah, halacha k'maisei, the halacha is like him, chutz ma'arav v'tzidain v'rayach, except for the three cases of arav, tzidain, and rayach. And since this is not one of those three cases, so obviously Rabbi Yochanan holds that way. So why do you have to say that Rabbi Yochanan paskins like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in our Mishnah? Says Gemara, Amaroi ninu v'alibad Rabbi Yochanan. It's a machlokes between Amoraim about Rabbi Yochanan's position. One man Niyama holds that Rabbi Yochanan paskins like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in all of Shas except for three cases. The other Amoraim never had that sweeping klal. Now the Gemara says we're going to make an inference about the rest of the daf is going to discuss about a case where a person is away, and the question is the ear allowed to go into their property and work on it? So the Gemara says, Mid Rab Shimon ben Gamliel nishma, from Rab Shimon ben Gamliel's halacha, that Marshall can sell my fruit, we could extrapolate the Meridin Karav L'nichsei Shavui, that the heir apparent could go into the property of one who is taken captive and maintain it. While midrabbana nishma de ein maridin karv l'nichsei shavi. That a karv cannot go into the property of a captive because we're afraid that maybe, like over here, we don't allow Marshall to sell my stuff. There we're worried that the ear might mess up the property. Says Gemara, how could you make such an application? Dilma adkan like cover up Shimon Gamliel hacha that we allow Marshall to sell it and lemishim de kakal yakarna. If Marshall doesn't sell the fruit, it's going to disintegrate and the principle is going to be lost. Aval hasam, but in the case of going into the field, hachanami de ein maridin, the karka is not going to be lost, so maybe we don't allow the ear to go in. On the other hand, if the reason is like Rav Kahana, because a person wants his own fruit more than 9 kav of another fruit, or ikrav nachba yitzak, because maybe he separated it as truma, the owner, and therefore it can't be sold. Aval hasam, but in the case of the property, when he was taken captive, hakanami de marina, maybe everybody holds that you could go in, because if the person is missing, he's captured, then he would want somebody to go in and maintain his property and cut down the weeds and etc. Says Gemara, lememra de trei taimininu. Do you mean to imply that the two cases are interdependent? That the case in our Mishnah and the case of going into the captive's property are not dependent one on another? Ivam Rabbi Yehuda Mashmul Alach Reb Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Yehuda says name of Shmuel Alach is like Reb Shimon Gamliel. And V'amar Shmuel Maridin Karv L'Nichtei Shavli, that a karv could go into the property of a captive. So La Mishum Dechat Taimu, can't we deduce that the reasons are dependent one on the other? Says Gemara, like trade time in. No, they're not dependent one on another. Each one has its independent reason, and Aknami Mistabra, because we find the Amar Rav Nachman Halach K'divrei Chacham. The halach is like the Chacham that Marshall can't touch the fruit, and yet Rav Nachman Maridan Karv L'Nechsei Shavi, that a karv could go into the property of the captive. So you see that they're not dependent on one another. Elishmami no trade time in they're not dependent on one another. Shmami no. So now let's talk about more about this captive situation. I should also give you a scoop. There was a chok Friday afternoon. I sent out a late text that I did a chok Friday afternoon. It is, yes, Yitzi Fuchs was with us, Nachman Chapler was with us. It is already on YouTube, it's already on TorahAnytime.com. By the way, if you listen to TorahAnytime.com, you should subscribe. There is, I hope, going to be another chok tomorrow night. So I hope tomorrow night there will be another chok. That's the plan.
One from my house too?
No, that's the plan. It's enough that I'm flying. I'm not, and if I'm going to be able to prepare anything, I have to prepare the Haggadah Shir. Since I'm going to be flying both Tuesday and Wednesday, I have to prepare the Haggadah Shir sometime. So hopefully I'll manage to prepare the Haggadah Shir somewhere in the middle for Wednesday night. But Marshall might be giving a chok. You could tune in to his website. It's Bourbon Incorporated. .com. Now, Itmar. Shavi Shenishpa. If, let's say, Chatzkel was taken a captive, and unfortunately for Chatzkel, Marshall is next of kin. So Rav Amar Ein Maridin Karvel Nechasav. We don't allow Marshall to go in. Shmuel Amar Maridin Karvel Nechasav. Now, B'Sheshamim by Shemeis, if the rumor is that Chatzkel died, then Kulei Alma Loi Pligi de Maridin. Everybody agrees we allow Marshall in. Why? Because Marshall is not going to do anything negligently, because it's very likely that it's his property. So he's going to take very good care of it. Ki pligi b'shaloi shama b'shemes, where we didn't hear that he died. Rav Amar Maridin, we don't allow Marshall in. I mean, who would allow Marshall in? Dilma Mabsalu. He might mess it up. V'shmuel Amar Maridin, why? Because we say that we're going to compensate him as if he's a sharecropper. And since we're going to compensate him as if he's a sharecropper, we're not worried that he's going to do anything, any dereliction. We're not going to be mafsid. He's not going to be mafsid. So Meisrei, Rebbe Lazar Ayman, it says in the pasuk, this is a pasuk in Shmos, V'chara api, my anger will be kindled, V'orakti eschem, and I will kill you b'cherev, I will kill you with the sword, V'hayu nesheichem almonos, your wives will be widows, Uvenechem yisaimim, and your children will be orphans. Now that seems to be redundant. If Hashem is going to kill them, then of course their wives will be widows and their children will be orphans. So the Gemara says, if it says my wrath will be kindled and I'll kill you, so then Yoideyani, we know that their wives will be widows or b'neihem yisaimim, and their children will be orphans. It means that you will be taken in captive, and therefore your wives will remain widows because they'll never be able to marry, and your children will be Yisayim because they'll never be able to possess the karka. Your wives will want to marry because there'll be an aguna. And the children will want to go into the property. So you see that we don't allow them to go in. We don't allow the next of kin to go in. It means that we won't allow them to go and sell it, because we don't know the father died, so they can't sell it. There was an incident in Narda where the son wanted to go into the property. And Rav Sheshes says he's not allowed to go into the property because it says over here that the B'neihem roitzim leirid l'nichsei aviyim, and they won't be allowed to. So you see they're not allowed to go into the property. So Amalei Rav Amram, he says, that doesn't mean they're not allowed to go into the property. We explained it means they're not allowed to sell it. Dilma leirid v'limkar tanan. So he didn't like that pshat. Amalei Dilma b'pumpadisat. Perhaps you're from Pumpadisa. The Ma'aylan Pila b'kupa de machta. This is a famous Talmudic adage that you want to push an element through the eye of a needle. That answer that it's talking about, that we don't allow them to sell it, that's not a good answer, because it's compared to the wife. Just like the wife can't marry at all, it also means that the children can't go into the field at all. Ma'asam klalai means completely not. Afhachanami klalai, says the Gemara, and this discussion is a machlokes tanoim. Moridin karv l'nichsei shavi. If we allow Marshall to go into Chatzkel's field, tanoihi. The Tanya, hayored l'nichsei shavi ein moitzinai semiyadei. If he went into the field, we don't force him to go out. Not only that, even if we hear that the relative is coming back, Chatzkel is trying to get back, and Marshall hurries up and harvests what he did and eats it, Harizei Zoras Venisker, he profits. Ve'elohei nichsei shavuyin, what is considered the property of a captive, Harishaya aviv vayachiv vayachav bin amarishin. If his father, his brother, or somebody else that he would inherit, went overseas, and we hear that they died, so that's a case of a nichsei shavui, that if he goes in, we don't stop it. And we said that that's understandable, because we're not worried that he's not going to take good care of it, because he's standing to inherit it. Okay, the next case of nichsei netushim and nichsei retushim we'll say for tomorrow, because the Gemara is going to go into detail what nichsei netushim and retushim are. So we'll stop over here. Also, Rabbi say we're going to do now, which I know you are waiting for with bated breath. We're going to do the Mishnah Yaimis.